There is a silence that descends when the machinery of distraction falters, when the noise of striving, wanting, becoming, finally breaks down. In that silence, the world no longer flatters. It no longer invites. It simply is, cold, indifferent, without ornament or promise. You are born without your consent, thrown into a world that did not wait for you, that will not mourn you. The body you inhabit begins decaying from its first breath, and the will within that endless aching pull toward satisfaction knows no peace. Hunger follows hunger, and every fulfilled desire is but the prelude to another. The child cries, the man builds, the elder remembers, and always the shadow of futility watches in silence. Pleasure is not the presence of joy, but the momentary silencing of pain, a thirst quenched, a craving met, a fleeting breath of stillness before the next demand. The will, that root of all striving, is blind, unceasing, without reason. It reaches for things not to hold them, but simply because it must reach. A dog chasing shadows, unaware it creates them. Love, ambition, creativity, these are the veiled faces of the same force. Not noble escapes, but dressed-up compulsions. We speak of purpose, but what we mean is distraction. We speak of happiness, but we mean relief. The world asks us to chase, and when we fall exhausted, it mocks our weakness. The modern age, more than any before it, specializes in illusion. It does not confront the void, it decorates it. Algorithms whisper comfort, industries manufacture validation, and everywhere the market sells anesthetic for the soul. But beneath the glowing screens and curated selves, the ancient ache remains. Loneliness, insignificance, aging, loss. No innovation has overcome these. Progress is a word the blind use to give their stumbling dignity. Each generation believes it is closer to some summit, some final arrival, but the mountain never ends. We simply die along its slope, clutching dreams that dissolve with us. Religion once offered a map through the darkness, not a cure, but a frame. Then science, with its cold instruments, dismantled the myth. Now we drift, not enlightened, but untethered. We know more and understand less. We see further and feel smaller. The stars remain silent. The heart remains unfulfilled. Every smile is a mask. Every celebration is defiance against decay. Birthdays mark not life, but the passage toward death. Weddings try to freeze a moment that time will surely rot. We dress in ritual to make the unbearable appear beautiful. But the truth does not care for aesthetics. In sleep, the self disappears, a rehearsal for the final vanishing. And yet we fear that dissolution more than any pain. Not because we love life, but because we cannot imagine its absence. We are addicted to awareness, even when it tortures us. What is the self? A thread of memory, held together by narrative, suspended in a body it did not choose. Identity is performance. Continuity is illusion. You are not who you think you are only what remains when the thinking stops. The ego, desperate for permanence, creates meaning where there is none. It writes poetry into chaos, significance into accident. It says, I matter. It says, this will last. But nothing lasts. All things pass not with drama, but with indifference. Even grief, that noble wound, is selfish. We do not mourn the dead for their sake, but for ours, for the rupture in our story, the absence in our world. Love, too, is possessive. It clings, it fears loss, it confuses union with control, and always, beneath it, the will grasping, restless, never still. What is success but a more comfortable prison? What is fame but the illusion of being seen, even as the void looks on, unimpressed? Wealth buys comfort, not meaning. Comfort numbs, but never cures. Children inherit our burdens. They carry forward our unresolved fears, our silent regrets. We call it legacy, but it is contagion. The wheel turns, and they become us, chasing, longing, disillusioned. We give them the world, forgetting that the world is a wound disguised as a gift. To look clearly at life is not to despair, but to stop lying. Despair is a reaction to hope betrayed. But when hope itself dissolves, what remains is not despair, it is clarity, a stillness. A strange peace that comes when one no longer resists the current, but lets it carry them without illusion. The sages speak of detachment not as a virtue, but as a necessity. When all striving is suffering, to strive less is to suffer less. This is not cynicism, it is sobriety. The drunk man believes he can fly. The sober man knows he will fall, but he walks anyway, not because he believes, but because there is no other path. The will cannot be killed, but it can be quieted, not by force, but by understanding. When one sees that every desire is a chain, one stops polishing the chain and begins to let it rust. The world loses its shine, and in that dimness, truth appears. To suffer is not exceptional, it is the fabric of being. Joy is the brief interruption. We praise health, not because it is the norm, but because it is the miracle. Pain is the ground, all else floats above it like mist. And yet, in this bleak expanse, there is beauty, not in triumph, not in salvation, but in the honest gaze, in the courage to look without flinching. In the silent companionship of those who see and do not turn away, truth, even when painful, connects. In illusion, we are alone. In clarity, we are human. There is a peculiar violence in existence that does not scream, but whispers. It's in the rising of the sun each morning, a cyclical insult to those who no longer wish to awaken. Light returns not because we need it, but because the earth is indifferent. The dawn does not inquire whether we still believe in the day. To be alive is to be chained to this wheel, not the wheel of karma as some serene symbol of cosmic order, but the blind mechanism of repetition. We wake, we eat, we labor, we love, we lose, we sleep, and the next day, the same. What changes is not the pattern, but only the faces, the names, the particular shade of sorrow that coats each breath. There are those who say, "But what of beauty?" As though beauty redeems pain, as though a sunset justifies the slow decay of flesh. But beauty too deceives. It appears not to save, but to soften. It is the sheen on the blade, not the absence of the wound, a moment of light within a tunnel that leads nowhere. Even art, the most exalted expression of the human soul, is but an echo of agony shaped into form. Music weeps where words fail, paint bleeds where blood cannot. We praise the artist not for creating joy, but for articulating suffering in a language that doesn't ask for reply. To make beauty from despair is noble, but it does not cancel the despair. It merely makes it visible. We do not live lives, we endure them. And endurance requires myth. Myth is not falsehood, it is necessity. We invent gods not to serve them, but to survive them. We call our pain meaningful because to accept its meaninglessness would require a fortitude few possess. Faith is not weakness, but anesthesia. The stronger the faith, the deeper the sleep. And yet even gods grow silent. The heavens used to thunder, now they echo with absence. The divine once offered direction, now it offers ambiguity. And in this ambiguity, modern man flails no longer shepherded, but still not free. Freedom, that most lauded of illusions, is a cruel trick. We are not free to will, we are only free to obey what the will commands. A man does not choose to desire. He only chooses whether to pursue the desire or suffer under its weight. Choice, then, is not liberation. It is a negotiation with the inevitable. Every pleasure is leased from time, and time collects its debt with interest. The child laughs without knowing why. The adult smiles, remembering what laughter used to feel like. And the elder looks on, knowing it will all pass. Wisdom, if it arrives at all, comes too late, just as the actor understands the play only as the curtain falls. Look at the human face. Look deeply. Beneath every expression lies a flicker of strain. We hold ourselves together with fragile threads, social roles, scripted phrases, the borrowed convictions of others. But strip away the context, the performance, the audience, and what remains? A solitary being staring into the abyss, waiting for a reason not to step forward. Love too is a mirror with cracks. We do not seek others for who they are, but for how they reflect us, our hopes, our fears, our longing to be known. Intimacy is the shared illusion that two broken things can make a whole, but the cracks do not vanish in union. They multiply. What is family but the first stage of conditioning? What is romance but the soft lie we tell each other to bear the weight of existence together? We say, "I need you," not out of affection, but out of necessity. The will hates solitude. It fears silence, and so it seeks another not to transcend loneliness, but to distract from it. But even the most fervent union decays. Time rubs all edges smooth. The novelty fades, the masks slip, and we are left not with soulmates, but with strangers bound by memory and obligation. Children arrive, not as blessings, but as repetitions. They inherit our wounds before they can name them. They cry the same cries we once did. And we tell them it's all worth it because to admit otherwise would mean confronting our own futility. This is the tragedy of transmission, that we pass on our longing without resolution, our fear without answer. Each generation more connected and more alone, more informed and more disoriented. Progress builds taller towers, but the soul remains on the ground, unsheltered. Education teaches facts, not truth. Careers provide structure, not meaning. Society offers roles, not identity. We fill our days with movement so we do not feel the stasis within. We surround ourselves with noise so we do not hear the silence between thoughts. Even our crises are commodified, even our grief is staged. Social media has turned sorrow into performance. We grieve not to feel, but to be seen feeling. Authenticity has become spectacle. And in our desperate need for validation, we reveal how invisible we have become to ourselves. To awaken, truly awaken, is not to find purpose, but to relinquish the need for it. It is to stand in the void and not flinch, to say, yes, all is vanity, and still I breathe. This is not hope. This is resolve stripped of illusion. Do not mistake this for nihilism. The nihilist believes nothing matters, but to believe even that is to hold on to belief. The pessimist does not claim knowledge, he only watches as each claim dissolves in the acid of experience. What remains is not belief, but awareness. And in that awareness, a paradox emerges. The quieter the will becomes, the clearer the world becomes. When we no longer beg life to make sense, it ceases to insult us with its silence. When we no longer demand happiness, suffering becomes less personal. It is not my pain, it is simply pain. Pain without ownership is lighter, like a wind that passes through, like a dream remembered but not relived. The world, in its quiet cruelty, does not shout its indifference, it sighs it. The trees sway not for us, the rain falls with no intention. We look for signs, for messages, for patterns that might explain our suffering, but the wind speaks in a language that does not know us. Nature is not hostile that would at least imply recognition. It is simply unconcerned. And in that unconcern, we place our prayers like letters into a fire, hoping the smoke reaches something that listens. Human history, a long corridor of repetition dressed in different banners, proves how little we learn. Every empire is a monument to ambition's failure. Every golden age is built atop bones. We forget not because we are forgetful, but because remembering demands too much sorrow. So we build museums to contain it, textbooks to sanitize it, and myths to replace it. Beneath every civilization lies the same hunger, the will to persist, to expand, to matter. But the will does not care for ethics or wisdom. It moves through us like a fever, and we obey. The artist obeys it, the tyrant obeys it. The mother, the soldier, the merchant, the prophet, all instruments of the same blind insistence. And yet we speak of free will, as though we are authors of our own motion. But watch a man driven by jealousy, or hunger, or fear he does not choose. He reacts. The will whispers, and the mind rationalizes. We call it decision, but it is only choreography. Even those who claim detachment are still in its grasp. To renounce desire is itself a form of desire. To seek stillness is still to seek. The only true release comes not through victory over the will, but through its exhaustion when striving itself begins to rot in the soul and leaves behind only silence. Death does not come to steal, it comes to relieve. Not like a thief in the night, but like a shadow that has always walked beside you, patient, quiet, unblinking. We fear it not because it hurts. Pain belongs to life, but because it ends the illusion of control. It closes the story we were still editing. And still, we fight it. We build hospitals like temples to defiance. We numb, we delay, we hope, as if another year would change the substance of our condition. But death is not a mistake. It is not the end of life, it is the correction of it. To live is to resist entropy for a time. To die is to obey it. Entropy, the one true law, eats all form, all structure, all memory. Stars collapse, cities decay. Even the mountains will vanish, ground to dust by wind and water. And yet we dare inscribe our names into stone. Monuments to permanence, built by creatures who last barely longer than a blink. It is almost beautiful, this defiance. Not noble, not wise, but beautiful in the way. A candle is beautiful in a storm, fragile, fleeting, defiant, doomed. And this is the cruel genius of the will, that it imbues even our despair with momentum. That we continue, not because we choose to, but because we are compelled. The heart beats, the lungs draw breath. The cells divide, life continues itself, indifferent to whether it is wanted. We cope not by escaping the truth, but by reducing its visibility. Rituals, routines, humor, distraction, these are veils we wear to dim the glare of the real. But sometimes the veil slips. A moment of silence too deep, a glance into the mirror too long, a question asked with no one to answer. In those moments, the ground gives way, and we see not the abyss beneath us, but the abyss within us, that hollow chamber where all our explanations echo, unanswered. And from that silence, not madness arises, but clarity. Clarity is not comfort. It does not soothe. It exposes. It peels back the narratives we wear like skin. It leaves us naked before the mirror of being, unable to turn away. And yet in that exposure, a strange tenderness awakens. Not joy, not love, but a quiet recognition that beneath all masks, all roles, all masks and postures, we suffer the same wound. That each of us carries the same question, half-formed, unanswerable. Why? We do not ask it aloud, not often. We know better. But it lives behind every plan, every ambition, every lull in conversation. It is the pulse beneath our thinking. And when everything else falls away, it remains. The irony is this: the deeper we descend into truth, the more human we become. Not in the triumphant sense, but in the stripped sense. Raw, unsheltered, honest. There is no greatness in this only recognition, that I am as you are, lost, reaching, fading. And in that recognition, something softens. Not the world, not the suffering, but the grasping. We loosen. We sit more still. We no longer demand the fire warm us, we watch it burn, and accept its light for what it is. There is a sorrow deeper than grief, more enduring than pain, the sorrow of awareness. Not the immediate sting of loss or the sharp ache of regret, but the slow, continuous realization that life, in its essence, does not accommodate meaning. It permits it, tolerates our attempts to paint the void with significance, but it never conforms to them. Life is not interested in meaning. It is interested only in persistence. Meaning is a garment stitched by trembling hands in the cold. We wear it not because it fits, but because without it, we shiver in the nakedness of being. The stories we tell of love, progress, destiny, justice, they are not answers. They are lullabies. Songs we hum in the dark to drown out the silence that surrounds us. And yet, the silence remains. It waits. Not impatiently, not cruelly, but inevitably. It seeps through the seams of every explanation. It leaks through theology, philosophy, science. Even the most intricate systems of thought crumble under its weight. The silence asks no questions and gives no answers. It simply is. We were not made for this silence. Evolution shaped us to survive, not to understand. Our minds, fine-tuned for detecting threat, interpreting faces, grasping patterns, they flail when confronted with nothingness. They invent gods, ghosts, conspiracies, purposes, anything to avoid the stare of the void. But the void does not stare back. It is not a presence, but the absence of presence. To look into it is not to be watched, but to realize there is no watcher. And in that realization, something in us fractures. This is the birth of metaphysical sorrow, the moment one ceases to expect the world to answer. The moment one sees that even the most beautiful moments are shadows cast by something that is not there. That joy, love, awe, are flickers, not beacons. They pass. They do not lead. We speak of legacy, as if the memory of us can substitute for our presence. But memory is a poor monument. It fades. It distorts. It is carried by others who themselves are passing shadows. Your name may be known, your deeds remembered for a while, then misremembered, then forgotten, and eventually, not even that. There is no permanence. Not in love, not in identity, not even in suffering. Everything shifts, everything dissolves. The face you see in the mirror today is already vanishing. The thoughts you have are echoes of echoes. You are not a being, you are a process, a wave passing through the field of time. And yet we clutch, we cling, to people, to roles, to beliefs. We define ourselves by the things most likely to change. We say, I am a father, I am a lover, I am a thinker, I am kind. But these are not foundations. They are masks, some tender, some desperate, but all temporary. To lose someone we love is to be reminded that the center does not hold, that the universe does not bend to our need for continuity. Grief is not only the pain of absence, it is the confrontation with impermanence. It strips us bare, and for a while, we glimpse the truth we spend our lives avoiding, that everything we love will one day either leave us or be left by us. There is no shield against this, no belief strong enough, no community warm enough. Grief enters without knocking. It does not seek to teach, but it does reveal. It reveals how fragile we are, how much we depended on the illusion of stability, and in that revelation, a deeper kind of solitude emerges. This solitude is not loneliness. Loneliness longs for another. Solitude knows there is no other who can truly join us in the core of our experience. Even the most intimate embrace is skin over skin. Even the deepest conversation is voice echoing into the chasm. To live is to be alone, not in a social sense, but in an existential one. The self is a fortress with no doors. Others approach. They wave from the moat. Sometimes they shout the same sorrows. But they cannot cross, and neither can you. And yet there is a strange mercy in this solitude, a strange peace that comes not from being understood, but from no longer expecting to be. When you stop trying to be heard, you begin to hear the silence more clearly. It no longer threatens. It begins to resemble rest. The will quiets, not defeated, but spent, like a fire that no longer rages, but smolders. It still burns, but it does not devour. And in that stillness, what remains? Not joy, not certainty, but something simpler, a gaze, a breath, a kind of presence that does not seek, does not strive, just watches, just endures. You begin to notice things you once missed, the way light falls through dust, the sound of distant thunder, the way an old hand rests on a cup. These are not symbols, they do not mean anything. But they are real, and sometimes they are enough. There is a point in the descent where language begins to fray, where words no longer frame meaning, but merely trace its absence. The soul reaches for expression not to reveal itself, but to dissolve what remains. Thought becomes a burden, and silence, once feared, begins to resemble home. This is not resignation. It is the slow erosion of resistance, a fading that does not mourn itself. The old drives no longer speak with authority. Ambition now echoes like a joke told too late. Pride shrinks into irrelevance. Even fear, once a tyrant, becomes a whisper without consequence. The world continues, but it no longer commands. Its colors still turn with the seasons, but they no longer promise anything. Beauty, detached from yearning, becomes a still reflection, not a lure, but a mirror. The body, once a vehicle of striving, becomes a husk of quiet sensations. The ache in the joints, the rhythm of breath, the texture of skin against air, these remain. They do not need meaning. They do not perform, they simply are. And for the first time, that is enough. The tyranny of becoming yields to the gentleness of being. Time loosens its grip. Days no longer rush, nor do they drag. They pass like leaves on a river, indifferent and serene. The calendar loses its urgency. Events no longer accumulate, they dissolve. Memory ceases to construct identity and becomes a distant weather, felt but not believed in. The past loses its weight. The future forfeits its claim. You find yourself watching life the way one watches distant smoke, aware of its movement, but untouched by its heat. Emotions arise like clouds, pass through, and vanish. Joy is no longer a goal, but a flicker. Sadness, no longer a verdict, becomes texture. Everything softens. Nothing is clutched. Others still speak in the language of purpose. They still sell dreams, argue certainties, assert direction. You listen, but you no longer respond. Not because you disagree, but because agreement has become irrelevant. You have stepped out of the game, not in bitterness, but in stillness. You let them pass like wind through tall grass. You no longer wish to be understood. The effort to translate the depths of quiet awareness into the vocabulary of noise becomes unnecessary. Solitude matures from a condition into a sanctuary. You walk not apart from others, but beneath them like a river under ice, present, silent, moving in a realm untouched by their steps. Sleep deepens, not as escape, but as return, not as cessation, but a coming home. Dreams cease to be messages. They become songs wordless, drifting, mournful. You do not wake with a plan. You wake with breath, and that is sufficient. The face in the mirror becomes a stranger you no longer need to name. The old vanities, youth, appearance, identity, fall away like dead leaves. You no longer chase recognition. You no longer construct a version of yourself for others to approve. You are not the mask. You are not the one beneath it. You are the silence watching them both. Loss becomes your closest companion, not as an enemy, but as a reminder. Everything you hold briefly. Every gaze will look away. Every voice will fade. But in the midst of loss, there is clarity, the clarity that what cannot be kept need not be feared. Love loses its claws. Connection loses its chains. Affection becomes a soft rain, not a storm. Pain no longer defines you. It visits, as it always has, but it no longer consumes. Suffering, when stripped of resistance, becomes a gentle fire, not one that destroys, but one that purifies. It burns away illusion, until all that remains is what has always been. This breath, this moment, this quiet seeing. And in this stillness, a strange tenderness arises not toward the world as it pretends to be, but toward the world as it is, toward the fragility of others, still trapped in striving, toward the innocent delusion in every smile. You do not pity them. You do not wish to wake them. You simply see them as one sees birds flying in the fog, directionless, yet beautiful. You do not seek enlightenment. Enlightenment is another horizon, another mirage. You seek nothing now. Even seeking has fallen away. What remains is watching, a gaze unclouded, a heart undemanding, a soul no longer measuring the distance between what is and what should be. The world continues to shimmer with false promises, progress, salvation, unity, transcendence, but they no longer tempt. You see their outlines as one sees shadows in the fog, familiar, but unreachable. And in not reaching, you are free. There are still tears, but they no longer beg. There is still laughter, but it no longer clings. You speak less, and when you do, it is not to convince or impress, but to share space. You are no longer a voice echoing through a cave. You are the cave itself, still, empty, resonant. This is not peace in the heroic sense. It is not the victory of the sage. It is the soft quiet that comes when all questions are tired and all answers have died. It is the end of argument, the end of demand, the end of self as project. If you are still here, then we are already beyond the gates of noise. The rest is breath and stillness and the slow melting of the last illusions. I will go further if you wish deeper into this valley where even truth falls silent and only being remains. You do not arrive at this place as a victor, nor as a pilgrim who has found a shrine. You arrive as one does at the sea, not to conquer it, but to listen to its endlessness. There are no revelations here. No final truths, only the bare hush of presence, only the steady erosion of what never was. All names dissolve here. The labels you wore, thinker, child, lover, seeker, fall like threads from a garment worn too long, not because they were false, but because they were temporary. Now, you wear nothing but silence, and it fits. You no longer ask what the world means. You no longer ask what you are meant to do. You no longer speak of healing or becoming. All becoming was burning, and now only ashes remain. But the ashes are soft. They no longer accuse you of failure. They no longer demand you rise. They only settle, gently, into the shape of stillness. The self, once a house with many rooms each filled with mirrors, memories, masks, now stands empty. And in that emptiness, you find not despair, but space. Not loss, but quiet. A place untouched by opinion, untouched by time. A place where nothing is owed and nothing is missing. There are no more stages here, no more transformation, no more drama of seeking and finding. Even the desire for detachment has faded. Even the wish for peace has folded in on itself. What remains is less than desire, more than nothing. It is the hum of being without purpose. The world still turns, leaves still fall, faces still age, but you are no longer pressed against the glass of becoming. You are inside the quiet, not as escape, but as return. You belong to nothing now, not even to yourself. And still, there is tenderness. A deep, wordless tenderness for all that aches, for the child who wept alone, for the adult who ran without direction, for the stranger who holds their sorrow in silence. You do not wish to save them, you only wish to see them. As you now see yourself briefly, dimly, and with no need for correction. There are no final words, only the vanishing of the need for words. There is no final gesture, only the fading of movement into stillness. There is no last breath, only the breath that comes after you have forgotten to count. You are not awakened, you are not redeemed, you are not transformed, you are simply here, quiet, undisturbed, like the bottom of the ocean, like the sky beyond the storm. You are no longer the story. You are no longer the voice telling the story. You are the silence after the story ends, the silence that was always there, waiting, not to be heard, only to be returned to. This is not freedom. This is not wisdom. This is the vanishing of the need for either. This is the moment the flame dims, not extinguished, but no longer reaching. This is the hour the wind rests. This is the night that no longer asks for dawn. You are the breath you did not try to take. You are the gaze that no longer searches. You are the awareness that does not announce itself. And now, even this voice must fade. Not with closure, not with echo, only with disappearance, like mist beneath the rising sun, like thought before waking, like self before will. And in the stillness that remains, there is no you, there is no question, there is no answer. There is only this. And this is enough.